Hello and welcome, I'm Zilla, and this is where I am live streaming my playthrough of The Forgotten City, which is a video game set in an ancient Roman city. I'll be commenting on the scholarly content, as well as, playing the game. So this is hour 3 of this game. I'll be streaming every Saturday around 3 p.m. If you're here in the chat, feel free to say hi and ask any questions. Hopefully I will be able to answer them. I think we are going to go ahead and get started. So, we have a special guest today I should introduce. Her name is Freya. She is wonderful. Oof. Okay, so back to where we left off, which is nearly dead, as you can see from the little death meter in the corner there. We have just gone back through the wormhole to Proserpina's temple. Luckily, our health just recovers with a little bit of time, so we can wait around to finish healing, or we can go ahead and go out. Alright. Hello, Galerius. We've had this conversation before, haven't we?
Who you are and what you were doing in the Shrine of Proserpina?
Yes, we have.
I don't think so. I've never seen you before in my life.
Well, there's an easy way to prove we know who he is.
Oh,
Not that we have much choice.
Drink last night. Sorry to have bothered you.
Bacchus being the Roman name for Dionysus, although Bacchus covers a bit of a different range in some ways, but certainly they both cover wine, so how much did I drink last night indeed?
Oh, and since you seem to be in a hurry, you should try out this device I made. Worked real hard on it.
I would not trust this in a million years in real life. Not because the actual item doesn't look feasible, but would you trust, like, hemp rope?
Just attach the pulley to the rope over the lake and hang on to the handles. If it works, it'll be faster than walking. And if it doesn't work, worst thing that can happen is you'll take a swim in the lake. I haven't quite summoned the courage to test it myself. But don't worry, it's completely safe. Probably.
How much did you have to drink last night?
Alright, see you around.
No, they did not have zip lines in ancient Rome, to anybody's knowledge. But this is kind of a nice fast travel option to some extent. This must be the down from whatever that is. One wonders how he got around to attach all these zip lines. But let's try it out, because this is a game, and besides, even though it would be perfectly reasonable for a Roman to assume that I couldn't swim, they didn't ask, so we'll assume that we can. That was pretty spiffy. We beat him here.
Salve. I saw you use the device I made, and it worked. Anyway, I'm sorry to ask, but is there any chance you'd be willing to do me a favor?
You mean, aside from testing out your dubious zipline contraption?
Well, I've been trying to get this rare flower from the rock spire in the middle of the lake. It's too steep to climb, so I hung a rope over the lake and made this pulley device, only I couldn't quite summon the nerve to use it. Do you think you could use the device again and try to get that flower for me?
Wait, how did did you attach the rope to the rock spire exactly? We can't ask that. But, why do you want this flower anyway?
I don't really feel comfortable talking about it. Look, I'll tell you everything if you get it for me, alright?
Sure, why not?
Oh, thank you. It would help me a lot. There's no rush, just whenever you get a chance.
As long as we're here, we might as well ask him some questions. We didn't get to talk to him last time through.
Well, as much as I'd love to get out of here, the harvest's always more fruitful in another man's field, isn't it? But Scintilla, Sentius's daughter, went missing a few weeks back. Could be she found a way out. If anyone knows for sure, it'll be her sister, Sentia. But she'd never tell the likes of me.
How did you get here anyway?
Well, it's a long one, and kind of sad, but I don't mind telling it.
I guess I have time. I mean,
happy.
I'm stuck in this time
I
loop.
grew up in a small village in Britannia, Camulodunum, with my parents and 2 little sisters. Lovely part of the world. One day, when I was about 20, my father and I were in the top paddock, loading our cart, when some Roman legionaries came along, demanding produce for their men. My father told me to run into the house for his axe, and so I did. Sprinted so fast I almost threw up, but by the time I got back, he was bleeding out on the ground, and our cart was empty. That was my first encounter with the legions. My mother died of a broken heart soon after, and things went downhill from there. I took over the farmstead, but I was young. It was a struggle. More raiding started before too long. We'd come outside in the morning to find animals missing, our stores pillaged. These legion thugs just took whatever they wanted. One night, when my sisters and I had nothing left to steal, there was a knock at the door. I knew who they were, and what they wanted. I got my father's old axe, pulled the door open real quick, and before that soldier knew it, split his face right down the middle. But there were more of them. I never saw how many, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up with a mouth full of dirt and lungs full of smoke. My home was reduced to ash. My sisters, dead. And they left me alive to see what they'd done. Still burns whenever I think about it.
It's pretty intense, but it's a real impactful thing to hear right now, I suppose. The way that an invading force comes and just devastates a home. So, Camulodunum, Britannia, of course, right around this time, the first really strong push to take the British Isles was happening. So timing works out just about right, and of course his pretty blue eyes, quite possibly a mark of his Northern Isle heritage, as we might say. So he's got good reason to be a bit peeved about the existence of Horatius and this whole stinking empire, but here he is, so what's about that?
No, I wasn't the only one this happened to. It wasn't long before Boudica led thousands of Britons in a rebellion against the Romans. Unfortunately, there were just too many of them, and those of us who survived, they enslaved. So then I found myself being transported all the way to Rome to be sold to the highest bidder. I spent a few years working for my new master, learning the Romans' ways, Romanized my name and everything. Tried to escape a couple of times, but they always found me, and I'd just end up right back where I was. I'd probably still be there too, if it wasn't for the stampedes breaking out. You see, about 7 months ago, an enormous fire broke out in Rome. Everybody was running down toward the river, screaming and shouting. I'd never seen anything like it. Human beings acting like cattle. I got swept up with them somehow, and the rest is a blur. The next thing I knew, some stranger was dragging me out of a river. Stumbled across this place and started my life over again. That's what I thought too, for a while. But it seems the gods aren't done tormenting me yet. See, I finally had my own farm again, safe from the grasping hands of the Romans. Or so I thought. Until Sentius the Decurion demanded I hand over all my produce. It's for the good of us all, he says. Only he takes the best bits for himself, of course. He even told me if I refuse his demands, I'll break the golden rule. I'm not sure I believe him, but then, what if he's right? So, it turns out our dear old magistrate is no better than the Legion thugs who took everything from me. I'm right back where I began. But don't you worry, Nemesis is waiting, and he'll get his, one day. He'll get his. Forget I said that last part, will you? I get carried away sometimes.
So, that's a whole heaping lot, right? So, he was a slave, he had to change his name, his culture, his ways, and he skipped right over a whole hecking lot. Boudica, of course, the legend that we know from the historian Tacitus. She was a high chieftain's wife, and the Romans came in and slaughtered her husband and raped her and her daughters, and basically all of the Briton tribes rallied behind her to fight back in a rebellion. And Tacitus describes her as a very powerful foe, a very good speaker, and an excellent fighter. The British army as a huge force, very intimidating, very barbaric, with torches and druidic rites, which, by the way, he made most of that up from whole cloth. He wasn't there. He did know some people who were there, but the whole point for Tacitus was that he was building up this great, foe for the Romans to be able to beat. So, there's a lot in the story of Boudica that is, we'll call it unknown. But she kind of lives on in this, spirit of rebellion. She's been reclaimed in a lot of ways from this image, and I think that that's probably a better legacy than Tacitus deserves in some ways, although I have to admit, I love reading Tacitus, but he's not the nicest, shall we say. Galeria's here, and I would love to know what his original name was. Galetrix, maybe? I don't know Briton names that well. So he said we when he talked about Boudica's armies, so he was a fighter. He was sold as a slave. We have no idea what he was made to do. It's impressive that he ran away so many times and isn't branded, but perhaps him being shaved bald is enough of a sign. They would shave the heads, particularly of female slaves, but also of male slaves, just to show their status. But a lot of times a rebellious slave would be branded as a runaway in some very prominent place. And we don't see that here, so whoever his masters were, they didn't really worry about it, I guess. Which, good for him. But none of this seems to have broken him, which is really impressive. He's still going, he's still farming, she seems to love. And it sounds like he might have actually been here before the rest of the folks tumbled in, even though he got caught in the same fire. Clearly he has no love for the Roman governing system, but he's also not keen to fight it himself. Honestly, the idea that he might be about to break the golden rule seems a little bit unlikely to me if he hasn't done anything yet with all that fire in him. I did want to touch on nemesis. Nemesis, of course, a word we use today to just mean sort of, oops.
Thanks, friend.
I guess I can't stay idle too long.
Anyway, that's enough of me rambling. Was there something else you wanted to talk about?
Yes, nemesis. So, nemesis we use in English as sort of a vengeful force, something you fight against constantly throughout. You know, oh, that's my archenemy, that's my nemesis. Linear time is my nemesis. That's just me, I think. But for Greeks and Romans, Nemesis was a goddess, an actual figure of legend. Greek Nemesis, more ambiguous in nature than Roman Nemesis, but both figures of sort of retribution, of getting your justice, maybe in a similar but more embodied way than karma. Like, you get what's coming to you from Nemesis, but pretty much always in the bad way. The Roman conception of Nemesis is certainly the goddess of revenge. So let's talk to Galerius about some other things. I'm curious what he thinks about this whole election.
I can't see how I could vote for either candidate. I don't like Sentius much, but Malleolus is almost as bad. Even I could do a better job. Me, a farmer. And I've never given a speech or put on a toga in my life.
He probably could do a better job.
Oh, I don't give it much thought these days. I mean, everybody here's got their own view about what we need to do to survive. But I say, let's spend less time arguing about what it means to be good and just get on with it, you know?
Not a fan of Seneca, this one. Alright.
Alright.
Let's get on with things. So, we still do need to go talk to Sentius. You need my help. I need your help, apparently. Saved me last time.
Fear is proof of a degenerate mind.
Quoting Seneca again, I see, but not stopping us from just going on up. Not at all curious about who we are. Same statues.
Ugh, this place has become a thoroughfare.
Right, Sentia.
We're finally alone. I assume you already know who I am. May I know your name?
So, you can, unlike with Galerius, just choose to start the conversation over, but that seems a little bit wasteful.
We have? Wait, if I understand correctly, someone is about to break the golden rule, forcing me to create a portal in time to bring you here? I must have entrusted you with figuring out who the culprit is. Only, I assume we failed, and you have to start over. Is that about right? If so, what happened?
Well, I sure couldn't stop it.
I see. Look, it's unfortunate, but all that matters now is that you make use of what you've learned and gathered and do better next time. Now, I assume you sought me out again for a reason?
Well, if I suspect somebody, I can tell him. That's what this option means. I can ask him more questions. I can always come back and ask him more questions. I don't think I actually got his story last time I was through.
Is my name, though magistrate is the proper way to address me. Before I wound up here, I was a decurion in the cavalry of Imperial Rome, helping protect civilization from the barbarians.
So this explains his costume. It's a uniform, but unlike Horatius's, it's an officer's uniform, and specifically of the cavalry. So we've got his little eagle pendant, and the bright red cloak. We can ask him about that.
It's a cavalry officer. I had 30 men under my command. This was my uniform. As magistrate, I usually wear a toga, but today I may need to survive long enough to create the portal for you, so it seemed prudent.
Oof. Well, that's true enough. So he doesn't usually wear this. He usually wears a toga, which makes sense because most Roman politicians wear the toga. The toga is the uniform of peace because it is actually very difficult to move around in a toga. It is designed to prevent you from easily drawing a sword, or from running very quickly. It is huge and drapey and follows over one arm, and it's generally white with maybe a stripe of color depending on your rank. But the idea is that you want to keep it clean and pretty, so you don't do anything, you don't do manual labor in it, you don't fight in it. And this is also why candidates are called candidates, is because they wear a pure white toga. And candida is the word for white. So he is dressed not as a candidate, but as a soldier, because he thinks he might need protection, and he's not wrong.
My men and I were at the Emporium in Rome as honor guard for a visiting dignitary arriving upriver by barge. Now the port is usually bustling, but just as our guests arrived, waves of people began running toward the river from streets and alleyways in every direction. They were trying to escape a terrible fire. Unfortunately, the crowd sent my horse into a panic, and I remember it losing its footing by the water's edge. The next thing I knew, I was waking up on a riverbank not far from here in the company of some stranger. I went looking for my horse and discovered that lonely temple. You can probably figure out the rest. I was elected 7 months ago, uncontested because of my command experience. Since then, there's been growing agitation for another election. They're supposed to be annual, but I agreed to hold it sooner, hoping it would placate my constituents. Unfortunately, it just seems to have emboldened certain elements instead.
Sometimes the way he talks, it's hard to remember the way that Galerius sees him, right? Because he definitely sees himself as this calm, collected figure imposing rational rules on the people and working his hardest for everyone around him. But he also he feels totally justified in stepping all over Galerius and taking his first fruits and deciding what happens with his produce. And Sentia sees him as her father, sure, but as an uncaring and possessive figure. So, keep that in mind.
Very well. If I did, I'd have led these people out of here already. I've had plenty of time to think about it. Let me see if I can sum up my thoughts. I've always considered my guiding star to be the well-being of the Roman people. Our survival and prosperity have always hinged upon honoring the peace of the gods, the sacred accord between the gods and the people of Rome. Give the gods what they want and we all prosper. Dishonor them and we all die. It's as simple as that. The real enemy in this place is not the Golden Rule, but human failings. The temptation to slide into degeneracy, greed, and hubris. I trust that answers your question.
Well, perhaps we can ask some questions. Oh, well, these are the questions we've already asked, so I guess
Now,
not.
was there something else you wanted to discuss? Of course. What is it?
Well, we can always try. I mean, in a way, it seemed like it started with Malleolus telling Domitius to start a fight, and Malleolus saying, "I look forward to killing you." So, let's see if we can say that. Let's go with Malleolus.
Why do you say that?
Well, that seems pretty blunt.
What? I'm speechless. How do you know? Of course, this isn't your first loop, is it? Well then, you must stop him from winning the election. I expect you'll need some kind of leverage on him, but I can't be seen to be involved in this, of course, so you'll be on your own. You'd better not waste any time, and may Swada, goddess of persuasion, go with you.
Well, I'll see what I can do. Swada there. I'm gonna pause it. Oop, that's the wrong button. Swada, of course, the goddess of persuasion, is just a personification of the word, essentially, persuasion. Swada, you can see the root of that in persuade. Right? So, same word. Per just meaning thoroughly here. Okay, so let's see what we can do.
Ave.
Awe being goodbye. Well, more just a greeting, similar to Salve. We could talk to Domitius again.
Malleolus isn't receiving visitors at the moment, it being election day.
Well, I would like to meet Malleolus.
Too bad. He's busy. Unless... No. You don't look like you could afford
Yeah,
it.
of course.
I'm glad you asked. See, he's a busy man, and this is an important day. He'll be inside practicing his victory speech for tonight.
I
Left me
bet
strict
he is.
instructions he doesn't want to be disturbed. So if you want to see him, I'll need something valuable in return. Just make it good.
Yeah, I wish. Wasn't there a way I could ask him about his
Malleolus, of
helmet?
course. If old man Sentius can't even protect his own daughter, how can we trust him to protect us?
That's, you know, not the worst argument I've ever heard, honestly.
Whatever. Just remember, I'll be watching.
Oh, I need something valuable. Oh, hey, there's a graffiti here. I hadn't noticed before. Sentius et Malleolus stercere eodem odor ali. Well, somebody doesn't like either of them. Sentius and Malleolus, same shit, different smell. Yes, precisely. Alright, well... Oh. Yeah, that would be nice. If you would try to help me. I don't know either of these
Best
people.
behavior, I trust.
Let's, Oh, no, that's Horatius. So. Who are you?
A new face, Ave, and may Vesta watch over you. I'm Equitia. To what do I owe the pleasure of this visit?
Alright, our Vestal Priestess. So this should be interesting.
Oh my, take it people are quite direct where you're from. I suppose it's quite charming in its own way. Usually, however, you wouldn't simply march up to a Vestal priestess and without due formality or courtesy ask, "What is your story?"
Well, she at least doesn't seem offended.
The proper approach would be to arrange an introduction through a mutual acquaintance in high office, by which time you would already know how to address me. And then you would find a way to satisfy your curiosity rather more indirectly. But to be honest, I've often thought what an unnecessarily formal way to communicate that is. So, let's do it your way. You just keep being yourself and ask whatever you like. It'll be a refreshing change.
Alright then. We're a refreshing change. Yeah, so, like I said last time, Vestal priestesses are considered very high in Roman society, and they tend to garner a lot of respect. So it's not at all surprising that she is a little bit taken aback by the direct approach. It is interesting that she seems to be invested in sort of teaching us, though. That's nice of her, in a way. Whoa, hello. Alright, so how did you end up here?
No, I'm not entirely sure. But what about you? How did you end up here?
It's the first time anybody's asked.
Karen, you say? And nothing about that name seemed odd to you.
It's a nice eyebrow raise, eh? It's not uncommon here, no.
I see. I wonder if... No.
We could be quite rude, but no, I don't think I can bring myself to do that.
I apologize. I don't mean to be cryptic.
Yes, you do.
It's just that you've got me thinking. Have you spoken with any of the others about how they arrived here too? I really think you should. Go around and ask them what they remember and see if you notice any patterns. I know. I just don't want to see what happened to Livia happen to you too.
Now that's interesting. And Livia was the older woman standing by the fire in the slums, muttering, terrifying things, so...
Up until a few weeks ago, she was a perfectly productive member of our little community, darning clothes and cutting hair. She was always so chatty, always seeking out newcomers and asking them where they were from and how they wound up here. And then, about a month ago, she suddenly changed. She withdrew, stopped working and became despondent, started muttering to herself. Galerius and I visited her to see how we could help, but she just looked at us with this haunted stare, called us bloodless shadows, and told us we were ignorant of some pattern. Look, it could be unrelated. Perhaps she simply fell ill. Or, as Galerius suggested, the weight of the golden rule was too much for her. But there is a small chance that she learned something, saw a pattern nobody else saw, and that it broke her. I just don't want to see that happen to you. So be careful, will you?
I have noticed something of a pattern, have you? Surely you have.
Then what is it? Yes, I also had such an encounter. What else?
Oh, well, that's not all I noticed, but it's apparently all my character noticed.
There are definitely some common threads there. But I think we'll need at least a few to ensure we're not just seeing coincidences. Keep asking people how they wound up here. I don't want us to rush to any conclusions yet. Livia's fate weighs heavily on my mind, and dictates we should be sure. Yes, you should ask the others first.
Yeah. So, when Sentius mentioned that Equitia would be happy to meet us since we were another scholarly type, I quite see his point.
I don't, I'm afraid. It seems to me we're exiled here until the gods judge us, one way or another.
Well, she seems to have some suspicions.
I'm quite sure it's the work of the gods, which is strange because they've never been particularly concerned with our misdeeds, as long as we've kept the peace of the gods. We asked for blessings, for good health, bountiful harvest, military victory, and in return, we offer praise, wine, incense, or animals. But here, it seems they require much more of us. I find myself reminded of an especially pertinent tale from our great poet Ovid in his epic Metamorphoses. Would you like to hear it? It is rather long.
Oh, this is gonna be fun. Ovid, Ovidius Naso, apparently named for his large nose. Gosh, would he still be alive at this point? No, he would have died in exile before Nero came to power. He was a great poet in Rome, basically the generation after Virgil, the Aeneid. They overlapped a little bit. And he was exiled to the shores of the Bactrian by Augustus for some unknown Carmen et Error, a song and a mistake. So, most people think that this had something to do with the infidelity of Augustus's granddaughter Julia, for which she was also exiled. But it's an ongoing mystery. The Metamorphosis, one of his epic, his longest written work, and contains a number of the myths that you are probably familiar with, as it stuck around much more consistently through the Western canon than a lot of the Greek sources did. So let's see what she says. I don't really have time, but we'll find out.
Baucis and Philemon were an old married couple living a humble life in a small town. One night, the town gets a visit from a couple of vagrants. They go from door to door, asking for a place to stay the night. Of course, being vagrants, they're turned away sharply from house after house, 1,000 in all, until finally they come to the little cottage where Baucis and Philemon live. Now the kind old couple had very little to offer, but nevertheless, they invite these strangers into their house and offer them food, wine, and a place to stay. Immediately the guests make themselves at home. They begin gulping down the old couple's wine, so much so that Baucis, the old lady, begins to worry they're going to run out. And then she notices something strange. Her wine pitcher keeps refilling itself, as if by magic. Realizing only a select few possess such powers, says to her husband, Philemon, "I think these men are gods in disguise." Immediately the couple begins apologizing for offering such coarse wine, and the vagrants metamorphosize and reveal themselves to be Jupiter, the king of the gods, and Mercury, the trickster god. They confide they didn't mind the meager offerings. They were just pleased that someone in the town offered them hospitality. Then Jupiter says to them, "You have passed our test, but everyone else in this city failed, so we are going to destroy this place and everyone in it, except you, who we will grant a wish." So old Baucis and Philemon escape up into the mountains safely, and they receive their wish, which is for eternity together. Meanwhile, Jupiter carries through with his threat and wipes that city off the map. Some say the moral of that story is that we must all honor the sacred rituals of guest friendship, the reciprocal obligations owed between hosts and guests. But I like to think it's that we should always show compassion for those less fortunate than ourselves.
Well, this is a familiar story now, isn't it? Certainly Ovid's tale and the Greek Baucis and Philemon are not the only ones with this kind of story. You might recognize elements of, for instance, Sodom and Gomorrah, or, well, that's really the biggest one, where Lot is the only one to offer hospitalities to angels in disguise, and then when men of the town come looking for those angels because they were pretty and want to rape them, Lot instead offers his own daughters in their place. Whoosh. Yep. Men, am I right? I guess. Oh, jeez. But anyway, the heart of this story seems to have twofold resonance, right? It's not just the gods destroying everything, and it's not just, you know, keeping the peace of the gods, as they keep saying, the Pax Deorum. But it is also this sort of ongoing, you never know what a good deed might do. I do agree, but I also think the gods might kill you at any moment is a bit pressing here.
A philosopher might take that view, but it's not entirely invalid, I suppose.
Okay, so the Cynics. Oh boy, the Cynics. If you've heard of Diogenes, he's the original Cynic philosopher. The word cynic comes actually from the Greek word for dog, as in which is kune. So Diogenes believed that all of society is a sham, and that the less you have, the more clearly you can think. And this is a very sort of like antagonistic philosophical stance. One of my favorite stories of Diogenes is that he was living on the street in a barrel. He wore a rag to keep himself warm, and he had only one possession, which was a little clay cup so that he could drink from the river. And one day he saw a beggar boy go down to the river and cup his hands and drink. And immediately Diogenes smashed his cup, because he didn't need to own that, he could just use his hands. So this is the kind of cynic we're talking about.
It must be completed by dusk, just the same as any other official business. It'll be between Sentius, the incumbent, and Malleolus, the challenger. Why do you ask?
Well, let's talk about Roman voting customs.
All of the male citizens who are willing and able to attend, unless they're running, of course.
Everyone knows women can't vote.
That's just the way it's always been, I'm afraid. It never sat right with me, either. There are some women who can vote, Vestal priestesses like myself, but in this case, given my role overseeing the election, I've decided to abstain. I can't allow the perception that I'm being anything but fair and independent, but if it's any consolation, there are other ways to influence the outcome of an election. By using whatever gifts the gods gave you. Nothing untoward, of course.
Right, so it's always been this way, but at least she's acknowledging that it makes no sense.
I'm responsible for announcing it and making sure the procedures are followed. You can, assuming they're eligible and willing to accept the nomination.
I could nominate somebody else.
As I said, I'm planning to hold it before dusk, but I suppose I could hold it sooner, if there's a good reason.
No, I
As you wish.
kind of wish I hadn't even said that.
Certainly.
Let's move on.
Come back to me once you've acquainted yourself
So that's
with the
Equitia.
rest of our neighbors.
And she is... she may well be off to start the election, in fact. We have spent rather a lot of time. But... welcome to the Forum. We haven't actually been down here before. The Shrine of Apollo. Oh. Hi, did you just turn your face towards me? That's awkward. Let's see what's going on in here.
What are you doing in here? Can't you see this woman is dying? She's been poisoned. She needs the resin of a plant called silphium, but that Culus cumulatus decius won't give it to me.
Okay, so culus cumulatus, that cursing in Latin again, culus being butt, essentially. Cumulus is like a pile. So my translation of this colloquially would be asshat? I'm gonna go with asshat.
It's too late. She just slipped away. She was poisoned.
Wait, she was
She
poisoned?
came in here frothing at the mouth. Normally I'd treat her with resin of silphium, a rare plant which is perfect for this sort of thing. And I knew Decius had some at his market stall, right around the corner. So I ran over there, but he just looks at me with this evil smile and says, "That'll be 1,000 denarii." There was no way I could afford that, and he knew it. Then that toad shrugs and says, "Supply and demand. I guess you don't value your friend's life that highly." Anywhere else, I'd just pay a thug to steal it from his stall, but there's no way I can do that down here with the golden rule. So all I could do is come back here and just watch her die. I kept on apologizing. And now I'll never know who poisoned her, or how they managed to do it without breaking the golden rule, or why she cursed that snake's cruel black eyes with her dying breath. Well, unless you have the power to bring someone back from the dead, there's really just one thing you can do. Get me that silphium resin. I'm going to have another patient in here soon. Could be in the next day, or in the next hour. And I will not allow this to happen again. I don't care how you get it, but you have to make it happen. Because if I lose another patient this way, I swear to the gods below, not even the golden rule will stop me from marching up to that genetricum fututor and scratching his eyes out.
Right, so genetricum fututor again, motherfucker. But let's just talk about some interesting things here. So Lucretia, obviously a Roman name on an African face. She was listed in the census as a foreigner. So she may also have undergone a name change, but she may not have. There are parts of North Africa that were part of the Roman Empire for a really long time at various points. So, not at all odd. She seems to be our resident physician for the moment. Silphium, I believe I talked about in our first part of this playthrough, a very important plant in Roman times. It went extinct. Actually, Nero was gifted the last known stock of silphium. Grew on the northern shores of Africa, in Morocco, I believe, especially. And we don't know exactly what it was, but it was used in cooking, it was used in medicine, it was a purgative and abortifacient, all sorts of things, and it was also associated with love and sex, and we think that we get our modern heart shape from its leaves. Well, see what we can do.
I'm Lucretia, and I'm going to be straight with you. I'm not a physician. This is Nevia's clinic. I've just been filling in ever since she disappeared. I'm tired and out of my depth and miserable all the time. But I'd rather take this on myself than let one of you lot mess it up. My husband and I moved to Rome from Caesarea. He embraced the Roman way more than I would have liked, and turned into an awful philanderer. I would have divorced him and demanded the return of my dowry, but I knew he would sooner have me killed than give me my right. So I waited for the right time to take what was mine and disappear. And then the fires came. As he prepared to evacuate our villa, I gathered our most precious belongings, coins and gemstones, and the moment his back was turned, I ran. I could barely see for the smoke, and the streets were full of people trampling each other. I ran for the river, like everyone else, and leapt in. The next thing I remember, I was waking up on a riverbank, not far from here. It's all right. Say what you will about this place. At least my fornicating husband will never find me. And while there's no shortage of snakes here, at least with the golden rule, they have to try to be discreet about it.
So, Caesarea, a place actually in modern-day Israel. So, likely that she lived there with her husband, but was not born there, since she is listed as a foreigner, and Caesarea is part of the Roman Empire. Roman women did have the right of divorce, but their husband did have to agree to it. So, like she said, might not have been a bad option if she had no way to socially pressure him into granting her the divorce. She seems like a very forceful woman. I like her.
Oh, this shrine was in use as a clinic long before any of us arrived here. Kind of strange to set up a clinic in the temple of the god of disease. But the god who inflicts a curse is also the only god who can undo it. So I suppose praying to Apollo for healing kind of makes sense.
Right, so we're in the Shrine of Apollo, and Apollo, along with Artemis, is, among other things, a god who is known to spread disease. He shoots arrows of disease and plague into people. And his son, Asclepius, is the god of healing, essentially. So, absent a shrine to Asclepius, the Temple of Apollo does actually make quite a lot of sense. So who is this Naivia character?
She used to run the clinic. She was a midwife, not a physician, but she was the closest thing we had down here. And she was good, too. Until she suddenly lost all interest in us. One day she told me she'd made some profound discovery about the golden statues. This changes everything, she kept saying. But I had no idea what she was talking about. The last time I saw her, the last time any of us saw her, she was muttering to the statues, like she could talk to them. And then she shut herself in the palace, barred the door from the inside, and nobody's seen her since. She's been gone so long now, we figure she's either dead or up to something so strange that she doesn't want anyone else to know about it. But I really wish I could reach her, because that's the only hope I have of solving a troubling problem, a real thorn in the paw situation. One of my patients is suffering from terrible rheumatism. His joints are inflamed and he's in constant pain. I really shouldn't say. He wouldn't like it. And he's a little bit scary. He's become so irritable that the smallest things set him off. And I worry he'll end up losing his temper and lashing out. And you know what that means.
I mean, really, that describes so many people here.
How to treat him, assuming she's still alive. But nobody seems to know how to get into the palace.
Well, see what I can do about that.
I wish. Some people here need proper medical care, not the half-baked, hanging by a thread excuse for treatment I'm giving them. Just don't get sick or injured here. I'll do my best to treat you, but I'm out of my depth and dangerously short on everything you can imagine. A city without sin might sound good on paper, but whoever dreamt it up didn't think it through. Maybe it was an attempt to create some kind of utopia. But snakes like Decius will always find loopholes to exploit. And what can we do about it? Absolutely nothing. In some ways, we are worse off because we can't take the law into our own hands.
So here we have someone who is not best pleased with the legalist approach that Sentius is taking, and presumably the god in charge. So you know, I do think it is interesting that she is in charge of this clinic with Nylia gone. We don't actually know what her experience is, and she hasn't said.
Oh no. Sorry, I don't mean to worry you, but no, that is definitely not normal. There was one other person who claimed she could hear the statues talking to her. But that was Nevia, and she went a little mad.
Is there more to tell you about Nylia?
She used to run the clinic. She was a midwife, not a
This
physician,
seems
until
like
she suddenly
the same
this chick,
story,
the
so
last,
I'm just
and
gonna
then
skip it.
She's been gone, but I really wish one of my patients. He's become. I just
I'll see what I can do.
thanks, I suppose.
So what about Yulia?
Sure. What do you want to know?
I mean, we heard that she was going to escape.
How did you know that? Yes, she did mutter something about the only way out. A few times, but nothing more than that, I'm afraid.
Well, is death the only way out? I mean, I guess that would rule out suicide, breaking the golden rule.
Do you really want to know? I mean, if somebody poisoned her, then surely they would have broken the golden rule, and so maybe it's best we don't discuss it.
Well, what kind of poison
Hemlock,
was
I
it?
believe.
Hemlock. Yes, the classic. This is what they used to poison Socrates. Socrates, of course, in Athens, was a street philosopher. He liked to stand on the corner of the market and chat philosophy with passers-by. He collected himself a little coterie of the youth who were interested in his teachings and challenged a lot of the existing rules, shall we say. This didn't endear him to the leaders of Athens, who gathered themselves to convict him of corrupting the youth. And in his defense speech, he basically told them to fuck off. And they convicted him of corrupting the youth and treason, sentenced him to death by poison. They gave him the hemlock, he drank it down, and then he strode around his prison cell, dictating his last words to his students Plato and Xenophon, among others, until he died of the poison. So, quite possibly a suicide, but who knows?
I haven't seen her in months. She's not allowed to leave Malleolas's villa, and they are quite secretive.
Well, that's weird.
Gladly.
Well, thanks.
Well, come back if you get sick or injured. Day or night, I'll do what I can.
There is our statue of Apollo. Oh, and I feel like I had looked this up, or maybe David sent me a note on this. I don't have it up right now. But that is a very typical statue of Apollo. The lyre, his signature instrument, heroic nudity. They didn't really walk around nude, you know, like that's not a real thing, but the male body was considered inherently beautiful, and you'll see his penis is rather small, which was considered the thinking gentleman's size. So, a large penis was brutish, and a small one was considered a positive. And somebody died praying to him. We can take a look at some of the clinic's small assets. We have some more Greek vases. An herb rack. Not really anything detailed there. Mortar and pestle haven't changed much in the last 2 millennia, that's true. We've got some mushrooms, more drying herbs, medical tools. I mean, they don't look that barbaric to me. I mean, we've got some pretty complicated stuff here, like forceps. This is before the time of, say, Galen, who really made some great strides in medical treatment, but it definitely, definitely has some amount of, it definitely has some amount of sophistication to it. Actually, in the time of Nero, there were 3 competing medical schools. There was the sort of Greek medical school that had been founded and practiced for hundreds of years and was generally considered the most reliable, except that there was also a deep anti-Greek bias, huge racist bias against Greek people and Greek speakers, and a lot of Romans believed that Greek doctors would try to kill you even though they could save you. So they thought of it as sort of a gamble. There were the sort of the Roman physicians who believed in sort of these. Honestly, you might recognize some of their quackery. Cato the Elder lists a lot of Roman medical techniques, I guess, but they tended to involve prayers and weird diets, usually involving cabbage and bloodletting and leeches, that sort of thing. Well, the leeches not so much, the bloodletting a lot. And then there was the third school that was emerging at this time that was even wackier. It involved, like, swing sets, and, Nero, of course, fell for one of these, because it's just inevitable. But it is now 4, so I think that's where I'm going to save for the day. Thank you so much for joining us for this stream, and I'll see you same time, same forum next week.